Hello, everybody. Welcome to Writer on a Boat number 3. So who is this for? This is for anybody who wants to write in any narrative form, and also for anybody who wants to understand story better and get a better appreciation of film or a novel or a TV series and so forth. It's all about understanding story. And I want to introduce to you my little friends here. This is Mrs. Molerat, and this is Mr. Molerat. All right, they're actually married. And I talked last week about the importance of having conflict in a story. So, here are relationships, intimate relationships are full of conflict. So this is why love stories and romances are very, very popular, because there's a high degree of conflict in them. So that's a little something. We'll be seeing the mole rats more later on, not in this episode so much, but I'm just introducing them for now. Why mole rats? Because for some peculiar reason, my wife and I love mole rats. Ugly little critters, very loyal and faithful, and there's something rather wonderful about their little hearts. So there we are, Mr. and Mrs. Molerat. More of that later. So just to catch up, if you don't know me, if this is your first time to this broadcast, I'm Alan Denman. I've been a writer of one kind or another all my life. I realised around about the age of 11 that I could write stories, write imaginatively, and I've written poetry, plays, radio plays, novels. In 1990, I became a screenwriter. I made my own short films, wrote and directed them. One of them won an award at the Portobello Film Festival. And then I went to Los Angeles and wrote and directed a feature film, which I will be putting on the internet very soon. And that was a hell of an experience. But I fell out of love with the film industry because it is a really rather brutal and soul-destroying industry, because very, very few people really succeed there. It's hard. And I chose a much more self-determined path, which is to become a novelist. And I found that I could write novels as well as I could write screenplays, and they're polar opposite really. A screenplay is largely white space. It's a sort of set of instructions, very minimal. So for instance, I always had a rule: no more than 2 adjectives per noun. So you keep it really slim and simple, whereas a novel is the opposite way. You can really spread out and go into more depth, more detail, more description, and so forth. But what I want to say today, what I want to talk about is stories shape our reality. I'll give you some more news at the end as well. But stories shape our reality. I talked a little bit about the purpose of story last week, and I said that one of the great things about stories, it puts our messy lives into some kind of order. And mentioned before the classic genre, the crime thriller. That's where order is destroyed because of a crime, a murder, a robbery, something terrible, and then order is restored by the end. Same role in Hamlet. It's Fortinbras, rides in at the end and restores order after there's all the carnage, and Hamlet has died and killed the king and so forth. Lots of bloodshed, but order is finally restored. Unlike real life, of course. So clearly we have a need for order and security as human beings, and story provides that. But it's much deeper than that, the purpose of story. And, I'm going to be a little bit controversial and say this, and that is that the Big Bang is actually a myth. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, a myth is, if you like, a cosmological story. It explains how we got here, how the universe was created, how why there's men and women, why is there evil in the world, and that is the purpose of myth, really, to explain the bigger aspects of reality. And every culture, if you go look at other cultures going back in time, they all had creation myths. This is a very common type of myth that explains how the universe began. And I'm going to say that in our modern technological scientific age, we have our own creation myth, which is the Big Bang. At the end of the day, the Big Bang is a theory. Scientists actually don't know for sure how the universe began. They've got a theory, and their data sort of matches that theory. But I'm saying at a deeper level, the Big Bang Theory is a kind of myth because it answers our need to have our reality explained, to make it understandable in some way. So there you are. I am being quite consciously controversial here, but it's an interesting way to look at it. The Big Bang is our modern creation myth. So that's what I want to say really about story and why stories are so important. And all of us, we are immersed in story from the time we're little children, and by the time we're adults, there are so many ways we can get story. We may think that we're a more visual culture now, and most people watch television and films, but let me tell you that 750,000 books were published in Britain last year, and a similar number in the United States. So there is clearly people are buying books, and in one form or another, the e-book, the Kindle, or the physical book, paperback or hardback, or now Audible as well. So the sort of, if you like, the literary written word is doing very, very well. And then, of course, there's all our stories on television, on film, plays. If we go there, it's rather expensive to go to the theatre now, I think, which is a great shame. I used to see an awful lot of theatre, but it is prohibitive, the price, if you're paying 30-40 pounds for a ticket when you're paying, what is it, $7.99 a month for Netflix. But nevertheless, it's a good experience. I recently saw Much Ado About Nothing at the Globe Theatre, which was an interesting interpretation of the play. I don't think it's Shakespeare's greatest play. It's a bit frivolous, it's contrived, and I think there's some plot holes. But apart from that, I'm very glad that I did it, because it's very interesting to see a live performance, very different to a two-dimensional screen that we mainly watch now for our stories, although I know a lot of you will also be readers. So think about this, that story also has a function to explain our reality, and to paint it in some way. So whether our view is that human nature is very dark, if our view is very pessimistic, we can find stories that will reflect that in some way. There's a lot of dystopian, a lot of pessimistic films and stories out there. But if you are more of an optimist or an idealist, you will find stories that reflect that as well. And I think one of the things I've always noted about film is how certain films at certain points in our lives actually are threshold experiences. They open our eyes. Take a film like 2001, 1968, an amazing film. But that really opens our eye to what else is out there. Where do we come from? The possibility that there is a much, much bigger picture. And some people were deeply influenced by that film, and it's a sort of a turning point in their life. So that's people often mark points in their lives by films that they've seen, because the films have left a very deep impression. And we'll talk about film specifically in future episodes. I have been a screenwriter for the last 20-30 years, and I understand film intimately. But really, these broadcasts are for anybody writing in any narrative form, because I believe, having written in all the forms, that the basic principles are the same. So a story, very simply, is a character who sets off on a goal, and let's get the mole rats back up. So here's this little character here, Mrs. Mole Rat, and she's setting off, and off she goes on her goal to achieve something, and then lo and behold, here's the antagonist, says, no, you can't. You've got to stay where you are. Go back. And I just mentioned that last week as a fundamental principle of storytelling, that without a good antagonist, your story will flatline. A story is only as good as its antagonist, and the greater the antagonist, the more gripping the story is, and the more the protagonist, the main character, has to dig deep and find reserves and be super clever, super smart. They are evolving. It's known as a character arc. They are evolving in order to defeat the antagonist. So that's a very simple principle, but stories shape our reality. Okay, so that's the basic idea here of this broadcast. I just want to end up by saying I went last week, Tuesday and Wednesday, to the Self-Publishing Writers Conference on the South Bank. And this is very important because in the past you had the big publishing houses, and getting a deal with them was a bit like winning a lottery, and you wouldn't necessarily make much money. But something happened in the 21st century, the introduction of Kindle and the ebook, and that millions of copies can be sold online. You don't need a physical book at all, although that's still very nice to be able to hold something in your hands. But it's a different kind of market now. And the SPF, this Self-Publishing Formula Conference, was very, very interesting. And there were many writers there. One of them had been a Coast Guard, and he didn't like the hours. It had disrupted his family life. So he said, well, I'm going to see if I can write. And they learned, these people, many of them very, very successful financially, have made a real career from their writing. And there's something exciting about this. And, I'm not saying this is the primary motive, but it does make you think, if you are a writer, anybody writers listening out there, who are you writing for? If you're happy writing for yourself and your partner and close friends, and that's all you want, but if you want to reach a wide audience, if you want to really bring pleasure and entertainment and escapism, yes, that's a good reason for watching films and reading and so forth. We like to escape. If you have a bigger goal, then I would say look at what's available in the 21st century. The landscape for writers has changed fundamentally, and that excites me, that interests me, because I think if you're a creative, you're always really feeling, well, is anybody out there? Does anybody really want to read my books, read my stories, hear what I have to say? And now you can do it. The technology's here, the means are here. Now you have to go out and find out how to do that, which is what I'm doing. But one of the big mind shifts really is thinking of writing as a business rather than as a creative pastime or a hobby. You have to think of it as a business and who your audience is and so forth. But I'll talk about that more in a lot more detail. But the theme of today's broadcast was and is stories shape our reality. The Big Bang is a myth. That's it for now.